I was standing at the altar, listening to words I'd heard 100 times before, when the room went quiet in a way that didn't belong. A chair scraped softly behind me. Someone stood up. And in that single moment, I understood something before it was spoken out loud. This wedding wasn't ending. It was being exposed. My name is Claire Reynolds. I was 29 years old on the morning I thought my life was about to begin. That sounds strange now, because a life doesn't really begin all at once. It builds quietly, piece by piece, until one day you wake up and realize you've been walking in a direction for years without ever stopping to ask why. I grew up believing in steady things, not grand things, not dramatic love stories or whirlwind romances, just steady ones. My parents were practical people. They stayed together not because they were wildly in love, but because they showed up for each other every day. Bills were paid. Dinners were eaten at the same table. Arguments were handled behind closed doors and rarely spoken about again. Love, in my mind, was something calm, something dependable, something that didn't ask too much of you. By the time I reached my late 20s, I had already learned how exhausting it could be to want more than that. I'd been in relationships that burned, bright, and collapsed just as fast. I'd loved people who promised forever and meant only the version of forever that lasted while things were easy. Each ending left me a little quieter, a little more careful, a little more willing to accept less as long as it didn't hurt. So when I met Daniel, it didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like relief. We met through mutual friends at a dinner that was too loud and lasted too long. I remember noticing how attentive he was. Not charming, not overwhelming, just present. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. When I spoke, he listened without trying to turn my words into something about himself. That felt rare. Our relationship unfolded slowly. We didn't rush anything. We moved in together after nearly 2 years, not because of passion, but because it made sense. We talked about the future in careful, reasonable terms. Where we might live, how many children we might have, what stability could look like if we built it, together. There were moments, even then, when something felt slightly distant, like standing in a warm room with a window cracked open somewhere. I noticed it, but I didn't name it. Naming things makes them real, and I wasn't ready to examine doubts that didn't come with clear explanations. I told myself that love matured, that excitement faded, that what remained was the part that mattered. By the time he proposed, I was already tired of questioning my own happiness. When he got down on one knee in our living room, no crowd, no surprise audience, just the two of us, I said yes because it felt like the responsible answer. Because everyone around me seemed to believe this was what I'd been working toward. Because I wanted to believe it too. The months leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of lists and decisions. Flowers, seating charts, colors that were supposed to represent joy. People kept asking me how excited I was. I learned to smile automatically before I even checked how I felt. I wasn't unhappy. That's what made it confusing. I was comfortable, secure, safe. The life ahead of me looked calm and predictable, and there was a part of me that desperately wanted that to be enough. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up before my alarm. The room was quiet in that early way hotels always are, like the world hasn't decided to start yet. Pale light filtered through the curtains, landing softly on the dress hanging near the window. It looked beautiful there, untouched, waiting. I lay still for a long time, listening to my own breathing. My chest felt tight, but not in the way people describe nerves. It was more like anticipation mixed with something I couldn't quite place. A sense that I was standing at the edge of something irreversible. The air smelled faintly of steam, and the flowers my mother had insisted on bringing in the night before. Everything around me felt intentional, arranged, carefully prepared. And yet, inside, there was a quiet hum of unease I couldn't silence. I thought about the years behind me, about the younger version of myself who believed love would be loud and unmistakable, about how she'd slowly learned to lower her expectations, not because she wanted to, but because life taught her to. I told myself this was what growth looked like. People think doubt arrives as panic, as a clear voice warning you to stop. But for me, it came as something softer, a question I kept stepping around, a feeling I pushed aside because it didn't come with proof. As I finally sat up in bed, the reality of the day settled in. By the end of it, I would be someone's wife. I would have chosen this path publicly, permanently, in front of everyone who mattered to me. I tried to picture the future, holidays, shared routines, even arguments that ended in silence instead of resolution. None of it scared me. That was the problem. I stood and walked toward the dress, running my fingers lightly along the fabric. It felt heavier than I expected. I remember thinking how strange it was that something meant to symbolize joy could feel like a weight in my hands. Still, I didn't stop, because stopping would have meant asking questions I wasn't ready to answer, and because I believed deeply that choosing stability was a kind of wisdom, that love didn't need to be loud to be real. I had no idea, standing there in that quiet room, that before I ever said I do, someone would stand up and tell me the truth I'd spent years avoiding, and that everything I thought I understood about love was about to change. By 7 a.m, the hotel hallway outside my room had started to wake up. You could hear it first, a door closing softly, the muffled roll of a suitcase, a laugh that didn't belong to anyone you knew, but still sounded like it belonged to happiness. Somewhere down the hall, someone's phone alarm kept going off, too stubborn to be ignored. Inside my room, everything smelled like clean sheets and hairspray. My bridesmaids arrived one by one, still holding coffee cups, still rubbing sleep from their eyes. They looked excited in a way I couldn't fully match, but I smiled anyway, because that was what the morning required. "Today's the day," my best friend Mia said, like she was announcing something magical. "Today's the day," I thought back, as if the day itself was a person you had to welcome. A stylist came in with a rolling case full of tools and sprays, and within minutes my room stopped feeling like mine. It became a little station of transformation, a place where a woman is turned into a bride, whether she feels ready or not. They sat me in a chair near the window. The light was soft and honest, the kind that shows you exactly what you look like without flattering you. I watched my own reflection while a stranger pinned my hair into place. Every few minutes, someone asked if I needed anything. Water, food, a moment alone. I kept saying no, even though I wasn't sure what I needed. The phone on the nightstand buzzed once. A text from my mother. "I'm downstairs. Call me when you're ready." Then another buzz. A message from Daniel's sister. "He's getting dressed. Everything looks great." I stared at that one a second longer than I meant to. He's getting dressed. It sounded like something you'd say about a job interview, not about the man you were about to marry. I told myself I was reading too much into everything. My mind was just restless. Weddings did that to people. But I kept checking my phone anyway. There was a part of me that expected a message from Daniel. Something simple, Something steady. I can't wait. You look beautiful already, I know it. See you soon. Anything that felt like him reaching for me through the chaos. Nothing came. An hour passed. Then another. People filled the room. My aunt, who smelled like perfume and nostalgia. My younger cousin, who kept staring at my dress like it belonged in a movie. Even my father came in briefly, awkward and quiet, as if he didn't want to disturb something fragile. He kissed my forehead and said, "You okay, Claire?" And I said, "Yeah," without thinking. But after he left, I realized I'd answered too quickly, like my mouth was ahead of my truth. Mia handed me toast at one point. I took a bite, chewed, swallowed, and felt almost nothing. The food didn't taste bad. I just wasn't fully present for it. The stylist turned my chair slightly and said, "Your skin looks great. Are you sleeping?" "Enough," I lied. The truth was, I hadn't slept deeply in weeks. Not because I was panicked, just alert. Like some part of me stayed awake even when my body rested. I'd wake up at odd hours and listen to the silence in our apartment. Sometimes Daniel would be asleep beside me, facing the other direction. His phone turned face down on the nightstand like it was hiding. I never touched it. I never asked. That wasn't who I wanted to be. And still, the memory of that phone sitting there, screened down like a secret, slipped into my mind now as the morning spun forward. Around 10, my mother finally came up. She walked into the room with that look mothers get on wedding days. Half pride, half panic. Like they're trying to hold back a lifetime from spilling out at the wrong moment. She pulled me into a hug and said, "You look beautiful." Her voice cracked slightly, and she quickly pretended it didn't. I hugged her back and breathed in the scent of her perfume, the one she always wore on special occasions. For a second, I felt like I was 12 again, standing in her bedroom doorway while she got ready for a night out, watching her transform into someone confident and shining. "Are you excited?" she asked softly, pulling back to look at me. I hesitated. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a pause. A tiny one. My mother noticed anyway. Mothers always do. "I am," I said carefully. "I'm just taking it all in." She nodded like she understood, but her eyes stayed on mine a moment longer than necessary, like she was looking for something underneath my words. Then she smiled and started fussing with small details, smoothing imaginary wrinkles, adjusting my veil before it was even on. The room stayed loud. Everyone was talking at once, but inside me there was a quiet pocket of stillness that didn't match the celebration. And in that stillness, doubts moved like shadows. Not big doubts, not the kind that would make you run. Just little questions that had nowhere to land. Why? Hasn't he texted? Why do I feel more calm than happy? Why do I feel like I'm walking into something instead of towards someone? At 11:30, the photographer arrived. He started taking pictures of my dress hanging in the window, my shoes arranged neatly on the carpet, my bouquet placed carefully on a chair. It all looked perfect through his lens. That was the thing about weddings. They photograph so well, even the parts that don't feel right. When he asked me to stand near the window and look out, I did it automatically. I held the bouquet. I tilted my head. I smiled softly. And in the moment between flashes, I saw my own reflection in the glass. Not just the hair and makeup, but the expression behind it. I looked composed. I looked like someone who had practiced being okay. That realization landed in my chest like a small stone. Mia must have seen something change in my face, because when the photographer stepped away, she leaned in and whispered, "Hey, you're okay, right?" It wasn't just a friendly question. It was the way she asked, like she'd heard something in my silence. I wanted to say, "I don't know." Instead, I laughed lightly and said, "I'm fine. I'm just overwhelmed." Mia nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Then she hugged me, tight and quick, and said, "No matter what happens today, you're not alone." It was a sweet thing to say, a normal thing. But the words, "no matter what happens today," echoed strangely. As noon approached, everything sped up. The stylist packed her tools. My bridesmaids changed into their dresses. My mother stepped out to coordinate something downstairs. The room emptied in waves, leaving me with short bursts of silence between footsteps and voices. At one point, I was alone long enough to pick up my phone and open our messages. Daniel's last text was from the night before. "I'm heading to bed. Big day tomorrow." Nothing else. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. I could text him first. I could say, "I'm nervous," or "I love you," or even just, "Where are you?" But my hand didn't move, because something in me didn't want to reach for him and feel what happened if he didn't reach back. So I put the phone down and told myself I was being silly. That love didn't need constant reassurance, that he was probably stressed, that men were different, that it was normal. It was always normal, the things we didn't want to question. When they finally helped me into my dress, it took 3 people to button it and adjust the layers. The fabric settled around me like a decision being sealed. Once it was on, I could barely move without feeling it. My breathing got shallower, not panic, just awareness. Like my body was trying to tell me something my mind wouldn't translate. Then my father arrived to walk me downstairs. He stood in the doorway, dressed in a suit I'd only seen him wear twice in my life. And when he looked at me, his eyes filled instantly. "Claire," he said softly, like he didn't want to break the moment. I smiled, and for the first time that morning, my throat tightened for a real reason. Because I loved him. Because he'd always shown up. Because he was steady, even when he didn't know how to say much. He offered his arm. I took it. And as we stepped into the hallway, the sounds of the wedding grew louder the closer we got to the elevator. Music somewhere below. People talking. Chairs scraping gently on the floor. Every step felt like a drumbeat counting down. I remember thinking, right then, as the elevator doors closed and my reflection stared back at me in the mirrored wall, if something is wrong, why can't I name it? And then the elevator opened, and the day carried me forward. The ceremony space was quieter than I expected. Not silent exactly, just hushed. Like everyone had agreed, without being asked, to lower their voices out of respect for what was about to happen. Rows of chairs faced the front, where soft light pooled around the arch of flowers we had chosen months ago. White and pale green, clean, calm, safe. Everything matched the plan. As my father and I paused at the entrance, the music began. Slow, familiar. The kind of song people choose because it doesn't distract, because it lets you project meaning onto it. I took one breath, then another, and we started walking. Every step down the aisle felt measured, almost deliberate. Like my body knew this was a moment it would remember forever, whether I wanted it to or not. I could feel the fabric of my dress brushing against my legs. I could feel my father's arm, steady and warm beneath my hand. Faces turned toward us as we passed. Smiles, soft expressions. People leaning slightly forward, as if love itself were about to arrive and they didn't want to miss it. I tried not to search the crowd, but my eyes did it anyway. Old friends, family, people who had traveled far to be here. all of them watching me make a promise they assumed I was ready for. Then I saw Daniel. He stood at the front beside the officiant, hands folded neatly, shoulders straight. He looked composed, calm, almost distant. Our eyes met. He smiled. It was the smile he used in photographs. Polite, controlled. A smile that said all the right things without revealing much underneath. Something in my chest tightened. I told myself it was just the moment. The pressure. The weight of everyone watching. We reached the front. My father kissed my cheek and whispered, "I love you," before stepping away. I nodded, unable to speak for a second, then turned to face Daniel. Up close, he looked exactly the same as he always did. Well-dressed, put together, familiar. And yet, standing there, I felt like I was looking at someone through glass. The officiant began to speak. He welcomed everyone. He talked about commitment, about partnership, about choosing each other every day. The words floated around me, meaningful but oddly distant, like they belonged to someone else's story. I watched Daniel while the officiant spoke. I noticed how still he was, how little his expression changed. He nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected. I wondered briefly if he was nervous. I wondered if I was supposed to feel more. Then the officiant asked everyone to be seated. A soft rustle moved through the crowd as people adjusted themselves, settling in for what came next. And that's when it happened. At first, it was just movement, a chair shifting somewhere behind me, the faint sound of fabric brushing against fabric. Nothing loud, nothing disruptive. Then a man stood up, not suddenly, not aggressively. He rose slowly, like someone who didn't want to draw attention but knew he had to. I saw it out of the corner of my eye before I turned fully, a vertical shape interrupting the neat lines of seated guests. The room stilled. The officiant paused mid-sentence. I turned my head. The man was standing 3 rows back on the right side. He wasn't dressed for a wedding, not improperly, just plainly. Dark jacket, no tie, hands resting loosely at his sides. I didn't recognize him at first. Then something shifted in my memory. A face I had seen once, briefly. A passing introduction that never turned into a conversation. Someone Daniel had mentioned in vague terms months ago. A name without context. My stomach dropped. The man cleared his throat softly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I know this isn't appropriate, but I need to speak." No one moved. No one breathed. I felt Daniel tense beside me. The officiant looked uncertain, glancing between Daniel and the man, unsure who to defer to. "Sir," the officiant began carefully. "This isn't—" "I know," the man said gently. "I won't take long." His eyes found mine, and in that moment, something inside me understood before my mind caught up. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't about attention. This was about truth. Daniel finally spoke. "This isn't the time," he said, low and controlled, without turning around. The man nodded once. "That's what you said the last time I asked." A quiet murmur rippled through the guests, not loud enough to break the spell, but enough to change the air. My heart started pounding in my ears. I looked at Daniel. "What is this?" I asked quietly. He didn't meet my eyes. The man took a step forward into the aisle, slowly, respectfully, like he was careful not to cross an invisible line. "My name is Aaron," he said, addressing the room now, though his gaze kept returning to me. "I didn't come here to cause a scene. I came because I realized silence would make me part of the lie." The word lie landed heavily. I felt like the ground beneath me had tilted slightly, just enough to throw off my balance. Daniel finally turned toward him. "Stop," he said. There was something sharp in his voice now, something I'd never heard before. Aaron didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply said, "You told me she knew." Every head in the room turned toward me. My mouth went dry. "Knew what?" I asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time that day, his expression cracked. Not guilt, fear. Aaron spoke again, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I was with him," he said, "for a long time, while you were planning this." A collective breath was sucked from the room. I felt it like pressure against my skin. "With him, how?" someone whispered from the crowd. Aaron hesitated, just for a second. Then he said, "In a relationship." The word echoed, relationship. I stared at Daniel, waiting for him to deny it, to laugh, to say this was ridiculous. He didn't. He didn't say anything at all. That silence told me everything. The room felt too small suddenly, like the walls had moved in without warning. I could hear my own heartbeat, fast and uneven. "You said you loved me," I said, my voice strangely calm. Daniel swallowed. "I do," he said. "I just didn't think it would end like this." End. Like this was a story he'd expected to finish differently. Aaron's voice softened. "I didn't know about the wedding at first," he said. "When I found out, he told me it was complicated, that you were more of an arrangement than a choice." I felt something inside me tear quietly, not dramatically, just decisively. The officiant stepped back, hands folded, clearly aware that this ceremony no longer belonged to him. Guests sat frozen, unsure where to look. My mother had risen halfway from her seat, hand over her mouth. My father hadn't moved at all. I stood there in my dress, at the front of a room filled with people who loved me, and realized something with perfect clarity. This wedding was real, but the life I thought I was stepping into never was. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel confused. I felt awake. No one told us what to do next. That was the strangest part. In movies, something always happens immediately. Someone yells. Someone storms out. Music cuts sharply. A decision is made with clarity and force. But real life doesn't move that way. It just pauses. I stood there holding my bouquet, my fingers tightening around the stems until I felt the pressure in my palms. The flowers were still fresh, still perfect. They smelled faintly sweet, almost out of place in a moment that had gone so quiet it felt fragile. Daniel was breathing faster now. I could hear it beside me. Short breaths he was trying to control. Aaron stayed where he was, hands clasped loosely in front of him, like he understood that his job wasn't to push anymore. He had said what he came to say. The rest was no longer his. I looked at Daniel and waited. "Say something," I said softly. He opened his mouth, closed it, then ran a hand through his hair in a way I had seen 100 times before. A nervous habit, a stalling tactic. "I didn't plan for this," he said finally. I nodded slowly. "I know. It wasn't supposed to come out like this." "I know," I repeated. The calm in my voice surprised even me. "What was it supposed to be then?" I asked. He glanced toward the guests, then back at me. His eyes were glossy now, but not from grief, from pressure, from being seen. "I thought I could end it quietly," he said. "I thought once we were married, everything would settle." Something cold moved through my chest. "And what?" I asked, though the answer was already there. "Aaron," he said, "that part of my life. Aaron flinched slightly, like the words had weight. That part of your life, I repeated. I turned toward Aaron then, not with anger, not with accusation, just curiosity mixed with a strange kind of respect. How long? I asked him. Aaron hesitated, looking at Daniel first, then back to me. Almost 2 years, he said. On and off before that. 2 years. Longer than our engagement. Longer than the dress planning. Longer than the guest list. Longer than the future I thought I was building. I felt dizzy, but I didn't sway. My body stayed upright, even as something inside me sat down hard. You told me you were confused, I said to Daniel. You said you just needed time. I was confused, he said quickly. I am confused. No, I said gently. You were dishonest. The word landed between us, solid and undeniable. I loved you, he said. I still do. I believed him. That was the most painful part. Because love, I was learning in real time, was not the same thing as respect, or truth, or safety. Aaron spoke again, his voice quieter now. I didn't come to take anything from you, he said. I came because I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't happening. I nodded. I understand. Daniel looked at me sharply. You don't have to listen to him. I do, I said, because you didn't listen to me. That finally cracked something in his face. For the first time, I saw regret. Real regret. Not for being caught, but for being seen clearly. The guests remained silent, but their presence pressed in on me. Every face felt like a witness to something private, something sacred and broken at the same time. I took a slow breath. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked Daniel. He hesitated. That was answer enough. I felt sadness then. Not rage, not humiliation. Just a deep, heavy sadness for the version of myself who had trusted so carefully and still ended up here. I thought of all the moments I'd dismissed my instincts. All the times I'd told myself comfort was love. That stability was the goal. This isn't about who you love, I said, my voice steady. It's about the fact that you let me plan a life on a lie. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. Not dramatically, just enough to create space. That small movement felt bigger than anything else that had happened that day. I don't want explanations, I said. I don't want apologies right now. I want honesty, and I want it away from this. The officiant cleared his throat quietly, as if reminding us he was still there. I think, I said, turning slightly toward him, this ceremony is over. A ripple of movement went through the room. Chairs shifted. Someone stood. Someone else sat back down. My mother was crying silently now. My father had finally stood, his face unreadable but steady. Daniel looked like he might say something else. I could see it forming. Another attempt. Another justification. I held up my hand. Please don't, I said. You've said enough. I turned back to Aaron. Thank you for telling me, I said, even if the timing was painful. He nodded, eyes shining. I'm sorry, he said. You didn't deserve this. No, I didn't. That realization settled into me like a quiet truth I would carry forward. I looked out at the guests, at the people who loved me, who had come to celebrate something that never really existed. I felt exposed, yes, but also strangely clear. I need a moment, I said. Then I turned and walked away from the altar, not running, not shaking, just walking. Each step felt deliberate, like reclaiming something that had been handed away too easily. Behind me, the room stayed frozen. No music played. No one followed immediately. The door closed softly behind me, and the sound echoed down the hallway, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. My dress felt heavier now. Not because of the fabric, but because of what it represented. A future that had been built without my consent. I took another breath. For the first time all day, it felt like my own. I stayed in that hallway longer than I expected. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because my body needed time to catch up with my decision. Sometimes your mind understands something instantly, but your heart still moves slowly, like it's carrying something fragile. The wall was cool against my back. Somewhere far away, I could hear voices. Soft, confused, careful voices. Like everyone had suddenly become afraid of saying the wrong thing. I looked down at my hands and noticed they were trembling slightly. Not from fear, from release. For months, maybe longer, I had been holding myself together with small lies. The kind we tell ourselves to keep life moving forward. It's fine. It's normal. He loves me in his own way. I'm just overthinking. Every relationship has quiet parts. Now those lies had nowhere to sit. I heard footsteps. Slow ones. Then my father appeared at the end of the hallway. He didn't rush. He didn't look angry. He looked steady, like an anchor that had decided to come to the surface. He stopped a few feet away and said, "Claire, just my name. Nothing else." I swallowed. "I'm sorry," I said, because I didn't know what people said in moments like this. His face tightened, and he shook his head gently. "No," he said. "Don't you dare carry this." That sentence hit me harder than the betrayal, because it was exactly what I would have done without someone stopping me. I would have made it my fault. I would have wondered what I missed, what I did wrong, how I could have been better so the truth wouldn't have slipped away from me. My father took one more step closer. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Not what should you do, not what will people think. What do you want? I breathed in slowly, tasting the dry air of the hallway. "I don't want to marry him," I said. Saying it out loud felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross, and that was the point. My father nodded once. "Okay," he said, "then we don't." He offered his arm the way he had earlier. This time it wasn't ceremonial. It was protective. When we walked back toward the ceremony room, my steps felt strange. Not weak, just unfamiliar. Like I was walking as someone new. The doors were still open. Inside, people stood in clusters now. Whispers had turned into quiet conversations. Some guests had pulled out their phones, but most were still frozen, as if they were waiting for someone to tell them what kind of day this was going to become. Daniel was near the front, speaking urgently to my mother. When he saw me, he stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked onto mine like he thought he could pull me back with a look. I didn't give him that power. I walked forward with my father beside me and stopped a few feet away from Daniel. Everyone got quiet. The silence felt thick, but I didn't fight it. I let it exist. "I'm not doing this," I said calmly. Daniel's face crumpled. "Claire, please." I lifted my hand. Not harshly, just firmly. "Don't," I said. "You've already made choices for both of us. This is the first choice I'm making only for me." His mouth opened again, and I saw the old pattern trying to return. Explanations, promises, damage control. But the truth was already standing in the room. It didn't need more words. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "I know," I replied. And I did know. He didn't wake up wanting to destroy me, but intent doesn't erase impact. "You didn't mean to," I continued, my voice steady. "But you did, and you were willing to let me build a life on something false. That's not love I can live inside." A few people quietly started crying. My mother pressed a tissue to her mouth. My father stayed still beside me, like he'd decided to be my backbone until I could be my own. Daniel stepped forward. "We can fix this," he said. "We can talk." "There's nothing to fix," I said softly, "because you weren't honest while you still had the chance." Behind him, Aaron stood near the aisle, still and quiet. He wasn't the center anymore. He wasn't trying to be. This wasn't about him. This was about me finally refusing to be a supporting character in my own life. I turned slightly, looking at the guests. "I'm sorry," I said to them. "I know you came here for something beautiful. I did too, but I can't pretend." That was all. No speech. No drama. Then I turned and walked out. This time I didn't need anyone to lead me. Outside, the air felt colder than it had that morning. The sky had shifted, clouds pulling across the light like the day itself was changing clothes. A few friends came after me. Mia hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth is, doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like losing the future you had already started living inside your imagination. That night, after the guests were gone, and the ceremony space had been cleaned like it never happened, I sat alone in my hotel room and unbuttoned my dress. Each button felt like letting go of a version of myself. When the dress finally slipped to the floor, I stared at it for a long time. It looked the same as it had in the morning. Perfect. And completely wrong for me now. I cried quietly, not because I missed Daniel, but because I missed the belief I had tried so hard to hold on to. In the months that followed, people asked questions. Some kind, some careless. How did you not know? Were there signs? Will you forgive him? Was it all fake? And the answer was complicated. Because the wedding was a lie, yes, but not every moment was. Some of it was real. The laughter, the comfort, the small routines, the way he held my hand during movies. Real doesn't always mean honest. That's what I learned. Sometimes people give you pieces of themselves and hide the rest. Sometimes they love you in the way they can, not in the way you deserve. And here's the part I didn't understand until later. The biggest betrayal wasn't that Daniel loved someone else. It was that he used my life as a cover for his. That kind of dishonesty isn't romantic tragedy. It's emotional harm. Years later, when I think about that day, I don't remember the flowers as much as I remember the quiet moment I stepped back from his hand. Because that was the moment I stopped negotiating with my own intuition. And if there's one thing I took from that day, it's this. A relationship can survive discomfort. It can survive awkward truths. It can even survive change. But it cannot survive a foundation built on silence and manipulation. That's not love. That's a story someone is writing for you. And the moment you realize that, the bravest thing you can do is pick up the pen. If this story leaves you with anything, let it be a simple reminder. Big betrayals rarely begin with big moments. They begin with small evasions, unanswered questions, a feeling you keep swallowing because you don't want to be difficult. If your body keeps whispering that something isn't right, it's worth listening before you're standing at an altar trying to prove yourself wrong. Stories like this aren't just about heartbreak. They're about learning how easily silence can replace honesty, and how often people ignore their instincts because everything looks fine on the outside. If this story made you pause or recognize something familiar, you're not alone. Many people stay quiet longer than they should, simply because they don't want to disrupt what looks stable. If these kinds of stories help you reflect, unwind, or feel understood, you're welcome to stay here. More stories like this are coming, each one exploring the moments that quietly change a life.